recording right now. Yeah, we're good.
Thank you.
Because I forgot to do that last week. And just to say that so let's do a proper beginning then. So first of all, welcome everyone to our session for today. This is one in the series of LUB's webinars that is unfolding, I guess, in time here. We've been using Tuesdays and Thursdays, and we'll be having them through approximately the end of July, at which point we'll make a pause and figure out what more we can do to add value for you. On this Thursday at 4 o'clock, we'll have Professor Linda Song from the Management Division. She'll be speaking about a three-stage approach to organizational resilience. And she'll be looking at 3 cases during the coronavirus. So that will be quite interesting. Our speakers today themselves have been working together, and I'm very happy to bring you Dr. Jo Ingold, who is Associate Professor of Related Management. Has been publishing and winning and undertaking extensive projects over her time at the business school, and she has been our impact champion for the business school. Now, I'll leave her to do more introduction as she gets into it, and she'll be working today with Tony Carr. Tony is the director of Forefront Partners. He's got 15 years experience within employability and recruitment, and he's advised on employability in the Netherlands, Australia, Saudi Arabia, and France. So I will turn it over to our speakers. Again, for those of you who would have questions that emerge as they speak, please put those into that chat function, the bubble at the bottom there. I'll be picking them up and we'll work those into our conversation. Thanks for coming, and I turn it over. Jo and Tony, take it away.
Thanks, Gary. Wonderful. Hopefully, Tony, the slides showing there?
Yep, they're up.
Good. Excellent. So yeah, it's wonderful to be here and to talk about a subject about which Tony and I are passionate, and I'm sure many of you as well. So this session is kind of designed to be a business-facing session. So it's designed to be in line with the seminar series to talk about the benefits. We're going to tell you about the benefits of employability or employment and skills programs and how they can help your business thrive. And I think there are a number of providers as well on the call, so it'll be hopefully an interesting conversation and discussion at the end. We're going to try unusually to keep our comments and presentation to a minimum around 15 minutes so that we have plenty of time for discussion. So anything more I need to say here? No, I think we'll move on to the next slide. So this is how the session is looking. So I'm glad that people are putting in the chat where they're from and they're in the country, both as their organisations as well. That's great. So keep doing that, please. And then, as Gary said, use the chat to ask any questions as we go along. And Tony and I will try and keep an eye on the chat as well. And as I said, plenty of time for asking questions. And we have some questions to pose to you at the end as well. So firstly, what is this session about? We'd like to tell you about employability and skills programs. Some people on the call may know them very well. Other people may be wondering what on earth they are. So we're going to cover that. We're also, I'm going to give a flavour of some of the findings from the research that I've done over the years at Leeds University Business School. Probably over the last 8 or so years, I've been doing research on employer engagement in employability and skills programs. So I'll tell you a bit about that and give you just basically a brief flavour of the findings, which will then lead us into what we think are really key selling points for employability and skills programs. So really how these programs can help your business to thrive, as we like to put it, and particularly in the COVID and post-COVID context, which is worrying for many businesses, thinking of what's ahead, thinking of keeping businesses afloat, thinking of staffing needs and all of that, which are really really important, as well as thinking of the people who may struggle to access work in the post-COVID context. And then we'll be talking a bit about how you can access programs, and then we'll finally do a question and answer session. It's really more of a discussion. So at that point, we hope to have a really kind of full discussion. As I say, we've got some questions to pose to you as well. So firstly, what are employability and skills programs? I mean, they've been called many things. The academic literature will call them activation or active labour market programs. So they're called employment programs, they're called employability programs. We talk about employability and skills programs because, as I discovered in my comparative research in the UK and Denmark, which I'll go on to talk about, really it's hard to draw a hard dividing line between the employment and skills programs, and it is important, we think, to think about them as being kind of on a spectrum in terms of how they can help businesses. So they are predominantly government commissioned, but by that we mean they're nationally commissioned. So obviously commissioned by DWP from Whitehall, but also we've got the devolved areas like Greater Manchester with devolved commissioning powers who commission their own programs. There are local authority commission programs. There are also local enterprise partnership, European Social Fund commission funded programs, and you know, charities also can commission. So there's basically a whole network, if you like, of these programs that ultimately are designed to help people into work. So to basically, if you like, provide a bit of a matching service to get people into jobs, and also there's a focus on skills and education and training. So the idea of improving skills and kind of workplace readiness, both pre-employment and also while people are employed as well. So that's why we think that looking across the piece is so important. The programs are delivered by various organisations, and they're sort of, I call them government conceived programs, but there's a variability in terms of to what extent they are prescribed by the commissioners in terms of what's delivered. So in the UK, for example, we've had black box models like under work programme where providers could basically use their skills and capacity to deliver various interventions to help people into work. But basically there's a whole network of different organisations who are delivering these programs. You know, many, if we're thinking about Leeds, there are many in the local area in Leeds, and you may well have walked past them in town or in other localities. In terms of the interventions, we're talking a lot about sort of basic stuff, I guess, but important stuff, foundational things like job search and employability interventions. So helping with interview skills, CV preparation, you know, helping people who may not know or sort of be aware of what the up-to-date techniques are for searching for jobs, and also more nuanced ways of searching for jobs as well. And then we've got a variety of interventions like work placements, work experience, we've got education and training courses, and then as I say, going into actually the workplace, there's then kind of post-placement support, and then you're looking at upskilling people within the workplace. So there's a whole host of interventions, and I've really just scratched the surface there, and I know that a number of people on the webinar will have their own experiences of delivering particular programs as well, and sometimes particular models that have been tried and tested. Tony, anything to add there before you move on to the next slide?
Yes, absolutely. And there's another key thing which I think employability and skills programs are, and that is that they're the best kept secret in the UK labour market. Right now across the UK, we've got tens of thousands of people, talent, future staff being supported and trained and upskilled by a range of different providers. And truthfully, as Jo will go on to talk about in her research, this is one of these invisible marketplaces that businesses on the whole don't necessarily know about. And that's part of why Jo and I are on a mission to try and do our best to promote this stuff to the business community. When we speak, because Jo and I do this because we're complete geeks at this, when we talk to, the likes of CBI or Federation of Small Businesses or recruitment confederations, they don't necessarily know about these programs. Yet these programs represent such a kind of a repository of talent and skills training and services to business that we think it's an absolute crime that we're not more visible to the business community. So that's my kind of like mini rant to start with. But I'm also aware that people on the chat, I can certainly see that there are some providers as well. So please feel free to chip in on this, because this is just one webinar. We're not, Jo and I aren't going to suddenly make the business community aware of the provider network just through this one webinar. So we want to generate a conversation about how we're going to do this as a sector and help more businesses to access the services that providers run. And thanks, Jo. You managed to switch the slides, so I've got your slides. So
I can do this one too. Yes, I just realised that when we started off, we agree a particular sequence, and I go rogue. This is this is a common thing. Sorry. Yeah, if I don't write it down, it doesn't always percolate. So I'll just briefly go through the summary, and then we can talk about the benefits. So basically, as I mentioned, at Leeds University Business School, and as Gary mentioned, I've done a range of pieces of work, pieces of research around employer engagement in employability and skills programs, because there is astonishingly little evidence out there. When we're talking about those, there's a certain amount that's available around employer engagement at the school with school age students, but once you get to the kind of post-compulsory, we've had employability and skills programs for a few decades now. Well, they started off in the 1950s in Sweden, but we've had these for a few decades in the UK and elsewhere, but there's astonishingly little on what we call the demand side, so employers or businesses essentially. So I just want to focus particularly on what my findings from businesses themselves. So I've done a number of research projects in the UK and also a comparative project in the UK and Denmark. And in the UK and Denmark, I did a project which surveyed over 1,500 businesses and also talked to over 100 businesses, interviews with businesses in the UK and Denmark. So we got survey data and in-depth interview data. I've also done data collection with providers, because what I wanted to find out was about both kind of sides of this relationship, if you like, or this potential relationship. So the people delivering programs and also the businesses that could benefit and have benefited from them. So some of the research was local in Yorkshire, and other research has been international, as I mentioned. So basically, the headline findings are businesses don't engage in programs as a normal thing. As Tony said, it's kind of like the best kept secret, really. They don't know what's available. It's really hard for businesses to find out what's available. They find it difficult to engage with programs because, again, they don't know where to find the information, and unless someone really reaches out to them, they don't know what's available. As we gave a flavour at the beginning of the different types of programs around, and that, as I said, really scratches the surface. I mean, Tony, you've done some work that talks about that looked at how many organisations were delivering just in an area of London, which we can mention. We're talking, hundreds in certain areas. So it can be difficult to engage, but as we're saying, there's a lot on offer in terms of how businesses can be helped and the talent pool available. But businesses are essentially quite unclear about the value of programs. So what we want to do here is really talk about what we think is the value of these programs. Tony, anything to add in there before we segue into the next slide?
I guess it's just to reiterate the point that from the research, and Jo is very modest about this, but she has probably got some of the largest database of research and evidence in the sector about what businesses are saying about their engagement with employment and skills programs. And the vast majority of businesses aren't engaged in these programs, and that tells me that we've got a real opportunity to assist more businesses to help or to hire and train from these kind of programs. And that's what we're looking for, almost like a rallying cry to the sector and to businesses to become closer together.
Exactly. I'll move us on here. Okay. Oh, some of the text has slipped off the side, hasn't it?
Oh dear. So there's a truism about the sector, in as much as there's a lot of different providers. There's lots of different products, and that again is part of the issue with businesses perhaps navigating this area. But there are lots of real advantages that businesses can take from working with recruitment and skills providers in employability. Firstly, as Jo mentioned, the majority of these programs are government funded. So it's not as though employers are going to have to be having a commercial arrangement with the organisations to recruit from them. So they are there really as a free service to employers, and should be taken up. So some of the text has slipped off. Apologies for that, but businesses, and this is again people who are on the call who do some of this stuff will recognise this. But please add in the chat any other advantages you think are there. These programs can really save recruitment time and cost for businesses. I think it's a reasonable thing to say that there are large numbers of businesses in the UK who are good at being their business and running their business, but might not have every idea about how to recruit, how to onboard people, how to induct people, and how to keep investing in someone's ongoing professional development. And these programs can help with that. It's increasing retention. So what do we mean by that? Well, again, huge proportion of these programs are designed to help people into long-term works. Therefore, the providers who do this well work really closely with businesses to make sure that the candidate fit works well and that people are there for the long term. As I've mentioned already, HR expertise. So again, we've got 98% of the businesses in this country are SMEs, and within that, you often don't have a dedicated HR team or learning and development team. And organisations who run employability programs have got vast experience in advising businesses on how to hire and how to train and how to retain their staff. The pool of talent for businesses is unbelievable. Much larger than I would suggest the commercial recruitment sector. You've got tens of thousands, and unfortunately, due to the current circumstance in the country, what will soon be hundreds of thousands, probably into the millions of people who will be looking for work, who will be on a program with an employability program, I should say, that will be there looking for work. And if businesses are looking for the right candidate, they could do far worse by not engaging with the providers in their area. Additional funding. Now, this can't guarantee funding, but lots of the providers who are delivering employability programs can also access things like in-work skills training for providers. And this is just another way that employers are, in some ways, are losing out by not engaging with this group of providers. There's a whole host of detail we could go into that, but we probably haven't got time for it on this. Pre and in-work skilling. So again, the employability programs are there to help people be the most employable person they can, the best candidate for the job. So there's a great deal that businesses can get from actually getting involved, helping to design programs that fit their needs, and therefore taking on a kind of pipeline of talent coming into their business. And the last point is one that I'll hand over to Jo, because she's very passionate about this, which is about pivoting your business.
Yeah, so it's something we've talked actually with partners we're working with in York City Council as part of a project that I didn't mention, but Gary alluded to, which is is my interest and Tony's interest in impact. So basically, it's not just about the research; it's about getting findings out there, but importantly, listening to what people's what businesses and organisations' current challenges are. So I've been lucky to receive some funding from the business school to sort of do some knowledge mobilization work. So Tony and I have been doing a lot of work with the employability sector in terms of really talking up the importance of business engagement. But in the piece of work we're doing with York City Council, this is something that they've been thinking about a lot in their employment and skills offer to businesses in the area, which is about helping businesses as we come into the post-COVID context to actually pivot. So think about what they may need to do differently in order to keep their businesses afloat. And Tony and I were talking earlier about a restaurant just up the road from me that there's a lot of other restaurants are doing takeaways, but very limited. But they actually are thinking that maybe they won't be reopening as a restaurant, but across the road they've accelerated the opening of a cafe, which is so not necessarily losing any staff, but actually just a different way of doing business and actually meeting the demands. And I think that's something that is going to be really fresh in people's minds. And I guess we're concerned, and others are concerned, that maybe businesses don't feel they've got the information to actually be able to respond to the sort of post-COVID context, and particularly, if we have increased unemployment, we don't want to lose talent within the UK. So what we think is important to do is for government commissioners and providers and businesses to all work together, really. And I think we're seeing some evidence of that, certainly in terms of the providers and also increasingly businesses. The commissioners is kind of a piece where we're currently still, it's a work in progress for us in getting businesses actually thought about at the level of commissioning of programs. But let's get back to just the focus of today, which is really about what the programs can do. And I'm really passionate about the big sell that I think is there for these programs, in that they are a fantastic way of increasing diversity in organizations and improving workplace inclusion for businesses of all sizes and sectors. So it may be that you're a large business with a CSR policy. So again, I've seen evidence of this in my research, where large organizations are working with a sort of intermediary organization on a particular program to help people into work and actually improve their work readiness, improve their confidence as well. And actually it's kind of win-win all round. And also for smaller organizations as well. Tony mentioned smaller businesses that don't have HR departments. So actually that kind of HR expertise is really important in making their recruitment and selection processes more accessible and inclusive, which was again a finding from my research, that the lack of accessible and sort of inclusive practices in recruitment is a real barrier to people getting into the workplace. So there's quite, so again, it's and businesses said to us in the research, we know the interview method doesn't give us the best employees at the end of it, but we don't know how to do things differently. So I'm really passionate about this area of work as well. And if you're a business that wants to represent your customer base or your local community, again, this is a really big selling point for these kinds of programs. And I suppose there is a concern for us and amongst many people who are providing services as part of these programs, that some people who are maybe struggling to get into work may end up at the back of the queue when there's increased unemployment. So thinking of inclusivity, which is another piece of work I've been doing, is really, really important. So thinking of those, we know that there are clear business benefits. McKinsey has talked about it. Other people have talked about the business benefits of diversity. So the how to access. Tony, is this me again? I've cleverly swapped them round, didn't I? So I gave you the short straw.
You can start this, because this webinar is predominantly aimed at, I suppose, businesses. Obviously, you're all very welcome on the call, but what we have with this slide is a bit of a kind of slumping of our shoulders, because we do recognise that this is a difficult market to engage with, because there's not necessarily one place where an employer can go and get all the information that they need. So we've presented on this slide some areas that we think are helpful to employers, but we also recognise that they're not the be all and end all. So again, if you're on this call and you have some ideas, we really want to hear from you as well about what is a good way of businesses actually coming into contact with these excellent programs in their area. So the first place that I think people can go to on the top left there is URSA, and URSA is the Employment Related Services Association, and it's essentially the umbrella body for the provider community. And as a business, you can contact them and they can plug you into the providers and the services in your area. The second one on the left there, growth hubs. So many local authority or LEP areas, so local enterprise partnership areas, now have a growth hub which is designed to support businesses in that area to access things that they need for their to run their business. And again, that can be a way of linking up with these very good services that will offer benefits to businesses. Jo, do you want to take the right hand side?
Yes, I will do. So, and then we've got Job Centre Plus, which is, of course, the sort of, well, I suppose you could call it the public employment service that we have in the UK in some ways. So they have a new website called employerhelp.dwp.gov.uk, which is kind of a business-facing website. So that will help businesses to get access to Job Centre Plus. And then, but as we mentioned, there are lots of other providers as well around, but that's kind of one way of getting access. And then we've also got the Lep Network. We've just put that link in there, so you can, I'm sure you may already know who your local Leps are, but it will then allow you to go straight through to their website. And Leps are often publishing data about labour markets locally, which can be quite helpful, I think, in terms of labour market intelligence. So it does depend on the Lep that's actually, in that area as to what they're doing. And finally, the local authority, their websites are, obviously localized and so showcasing the kind of local provision. Of course, there's kind of varied information on all of these, and something that when Tony mentioned the slump of the shoulders, because this is our big soapbox thing, isn't it, Tony? Really, that we've been working on for years. Really, that we're really passionate that there's not easy ways of businesses getting hold of information about what is delivered in local areas and by whom. And I know from my research that businesses aren't necessarily bothered about who's delivering, what the program is. They really just want to know, what are the business benefits, what can you offer me? And the business benefits do tend to divide up into the two slides that we put forward. Basically, the different, it could be help with recruitment, help with increasing retention, obviously savings to the business that way, because we know recruitment costs a lot of money, losing people and having to replace them costs a lot of money, and also the inclusion and diversity as well. So yeah, so we're really passionate about this, but we were doing a bit of a trawl around the internet, weren't we, Tony? And it's so difficult. This is not a great punchline, to be honest, but we'll be moving to the discussion next and digging into these issues, because what we're interested in finding out is where you go for information for your business, when you want to recruit, when you want to upskill your staff, because we sort of keep pushing for central points of information for all of this, because when I spoke to businesses, for example, in the northeast of England, many of them bemoaned the demise of regional development agencies. One northeast in particular was a really well-known and very well respected entity that really helped businesses through the process. And so it's not easy, but the point of our presentation is really we'd like to know, we'd like to get across the benefits of the programs and find out a bit more about what your pressing priorities are for your business and where you find information as well. So we've got a few questions, haven't we, Tony, to pose first of all?
And these questions are there to, I suppose, stimulate debate rather than kind of constrain it just to the questions that we have. So if you're on this call and you are a hiring business, we're interested to know, what are your needs currently at the moment, and where might you go for recruitment and training or other business advice. And if you're an employability provider on here, what else can you throw into this debate, either by way of challenge to what Jo and I are saying, or by way of sharing best practice, links, resources, and what else, Jo? What are the questions?
So first question is, what are your needs as a business? Shall I put that in the chat?
Yeah.
What are your needs as a business? So that's your kind of current needs, but also your, the needs that you think are going to be coming on stream imminently, basically. And then we've got other questions about, where do you find information to help you run your business? How do you recruit and train your staff? Where do you go for training, for information? And then we've got a question particularly for providers, but we're really interested to hear from people on the call as to what is really pressing for you at the moment. I don't know if people want to talk. Gary and Carolina, can people actually talk, or can we unmute them, or is it just in the chat?
I think we can unmute people. Let's just review. Is this the moment to open up the conversation?
Yes, absolutely, because all we've got following now is basically, all we've got following now is just the underpinning research and my manifesto, which was recently published in the Institute of Employability Professionals journal, the very first one. I'm a fellow of the IEP quite recently and spoke at their summit in March. So that is kind of my manifesto for what people who are engaging with businesses can basically do, and it's evidence-based. And then finally we've got our contact details there. So yeah, and I know we've got some questions in the chat as well that we can pick up on too.
We do. Why don't we start with a question from Jeffrey Greenwich, and then we'll go and maybe see some of the folks have made comments, but we'll start with a question from Jeffrey. Jeffrey, let's see. Hold on a second. I'm testing my non-existent skills here. I believe I can mute. Jeffrey, I think you're free to speak if you'd like to speak your question.
Yes, my question was very much around diversity and inclusion. Clearly they're important for business growth. We accept that, McKinsey, we all accept that. But is there a role for employment providers here in that brokerage piece to help businesses really understand the positive impact having a diverse group around the table can make on their business? So not just providing the raw material in terms of the individual for the work, but working with the business to ensure that that individual is well embedded into the organization.
I would say absolutely. Tony, do you agree on that?
Jeffrey, thank you so much for a really important question. And one of the things that we've noticed, Jo and I, when looking at employment programs and best practice, I suppose, is that where we find I suppose the most entrenched and profound relationships is where you have providers not having a transactional kind of fill a vacancy type relationship with providers, but actually assisting them with the kind of information that they are experts in to help employers be either a better employer or more flexible employer, to help them understand how to hire people with criminal convictions or how to be flexible to someone with young children. And that is a real service for businesses. That is something which businesses can benefit from. And your point about diversity and inclusion is one example of how providers can do a really solid service for businesses to help them not only to understand diversity and inclusion, but ultimately how diversity and inclusion can help them with their customer base, how it can help them retain staff. There's all sorts of benefits. So I would wholeheartedly agree with you, and I would also flag that there are really good examples out there of businesses doing this. One example is we've spoken recently to Public Health England's oh gosh, I'm always going to get this wrong, but the IPS service, which focuses on people who have got drug and alcohol histories but are moving back into employment, and some fantastic examples of the team on the IPS not going to employers and saying, oh, can we fill your vacancy, but actually saying, we've got some really important information for you as a business. We know that as a business, your staff X percentage likely to have a problem with drug and alcohol. So we want to give you some strategies, some policies, some assistance, some training to help your staff. And that has really led to some fantastic relationships where they're getting repeat business, where employers are coming to them and saying, can you do more of this? And we want to hire some people, and we're going to give some people some opportunities to do work experience. So I suppose the quick answer, Jeffrey, is yes. The long answer is all that waffle that I've just gone through.
Can I have a quick follow-up then? My second
please.
point is why doesn't it happen? Is there a financial implication here for providers or for businesses? Is something stopping the that really good brokerage conversation taking place? That's my final question.
That's a really good point. Yeah.
That's very good, Jeffrey. Jo, I can go if you unless you want to.
Yeah, I was going to return to just sort of add to your previous point, but if you'd like to take that one about the sector and the kind of performance aspects, maybe from a sector view, that'd be really valuable.
I'm not sure there are necessarily performance implications. I think there's maybe capacity implications in terms of people having enough time to do some of this kind of high quality services to employers. But I would also suggest that there's a kind of a confidence and skill deficit in some areas of the employability sector, in as much as individual advisors aren't necessarily equipped to have that diversity and inclusion conversation with an employer. They might not understand the best way of approaching that. They might feel that they're not the best person to have that conversation. So I think where it works well, you have people who feel confident and empowered with the right knowledge and skill set to do that piece of work with the employer. But I don't think there's a consistent approach to that across the sector. I hope that helps to answer that question.
Which is what we're doing some work on as well, and also as I mentioned about the commissioning stage as well, that's why it's so important, and we're still working on this. We won't give up. That commissioners really understand the importance of businesses when they're commissioning programs, and think about that when they're setting targets and also the incentives built into programs. Hannah, thank you for that comment in response to Jeffrey's question in terms of the York and North Yorkshire Lep, so targeting funds available through ESF to micro businesses and SMEs. So fantastic. And the point I was going to make to add to Tony's point, I'm just seeing whether I can remember. Yeah, I mean, Jeffrey, I think you're right that people get diversity and inclusion, but I don't think enough organisations get it and are really embedding inclusion. In fact, I was just working with colleagues today writing up a paper from some research we did last year on inclusion, where we mapped out the different approaches to inclusion in different organisations. So kind of going from more ad hoc to the more kind of culturally embedded inclusion, I guess. And I mean, I think we can we can still afford to be a bit critical perhaps and say that many organizations have still got a way to go. And I've certainly known providers, walking past a cafe in a city and sort of challenging the owners just on basic kind of equality things, like they put a card in the window saying waitress wanted blouse and skirt available. So immediately, and this really did happen, there are so many examples of this, and that's not about broad diversity inclusion, that's kind of basic, that's not even lawful for you to do that. So I mean, I think there's a real real opportunity here to kind of educate businesses and also sell the benefits. But and Tony's absolutely right that in our research that we did find that that there was a link. We found a statistical link between kind of the relational engagement, so actually building good relationships with employers and actually getting successful job outcomes for people.
Thank you. Maybe Julia has made a comment. Julia Hoskins from New College, Swindon. Julia, would you like to unmute yourself and jump in with your observation?
Hello. Yeah, I was very interested to hear about the diversity question. It's one of the things that we struggle with our students in computing, particularly. And it's because many of them may be on the autistic spectrum. Often they will have very specific skills which make them ideal as software developers or IT technicians, but it means that they might not be able to join in confidently with team meetings, and can sometimes there is stereotypical barriers as to why a company finds it difficult to recruit because they've always recruited a particular type of person for a job. But often it will be young people who can bring new, fresh ideas into a business, although the payoff for that really is the employer having to spend some time with that young person to teach them, the ropes and what might be needed. One of the things that we've done with businesses in the past has been sector-based skills academies, and that's one of the things that we've found has been really helpful with an employability program that is specific to a particular employer who's recruiting in an area. So, whether they're looking for skills in team leading, even a food hygiene qualification as an FE provider, often it's things that we can fund, which might be something that's, a really important skill set for an employer to have. But there's oh, thank you, Joe. I just saw your link about neurodiversity. That's one of the things that is very important, and that we're working with a lot of large employers in Swindon on. Thank you.
Excellent, really good points. Yeah, Genius Within and the wonderful Nancy Doyle, who was on the program Employable Me, if anyone's watched that, which always used to make me cry whether someone got a job or didn't. It's just amazing. So Nancy's absolutely fantastic, and Genius Within, great organisation. But I'd like to pick up your point, Julia, there, just about the limitations of recruiting and sort of thinking about job roles in the way that they've always been thought about, and just not really thinking about what's actually needed for the job. I mean, I'm hopeful that after this in terms of the COVID crisis, where so many people have been able to work flexibly, just as one example, when we know from research that people with disabilities and long-term health problems have really struggled often to be permitted to work flexibly. And of course, I'm not suggesting that this flexible working environment that we're in now has worked for everybody, because it may well not have done. We've got a survey out at the moment on that. But basically, I hope that we can learn something from this context in terms of businesses' capacity to suddenly change ways of working. So I'd really hope that we can build on that. And thank you, some great thanks Ant, for putting that in the chat. Some really great things in there. I hope that helps, Julia. Yeah, Tony.
If I can build on what you said there, and also with reference to Genius Within, I think there's a real interesting lesson for the sector as a whole, which is that this sector has such expertise, more expertise than a lot of other sectors, in being able to help people who might be have complex barriers. And what Genius Within have done, I think, very, very well, is reframe that expertise for the employer, and gone through a process of really working out what their skills, their expertise on working with people with neurodiversity, and how that is an advantageous sort of approach for businesses. And they're incredibly successful at doing this, and they've commercialized that offer to businesses because it has value for business. And that's a really interesting example of how a specialist organization who's working on a particular program, because that's what's been commissioned in their area, is applying a lens and thinking, well, what is the expert service that we're delivering for this customer group, and how do we repackage that for our business community and make it valuable to them? I think is something that everyone can look at.
Appreciate that. We've got a Jenny, who's been active on chat, has posed an interesting question, which I'd like to myself know the answer to. We've talked about the need to think about dimensionalizing value as we move forward from the COVID. And Jenny has a question. Jenny, can you unmute yourself and maybe join the conversation?
Hello. It was just around social return on investment and about linking that up with trying to utilise that to fill some vacancies. I work at a housing association, and it's something that we'd like to do with our contractors. So I run an employability programme. So we've got like 10,000 properties, and it's like linking our customers up to those vacancies through the social return on investment. It's something I'd like to do, but we've never got there yet. We haven't got there yet.
Tony, is this something that you've come across? Because I must confess that I haven't. So
I have to an extent social return on investment. I'm not an expert by any stretch, but I think it's one of these examples of what is of benefit to the business, and social return on investment, I think, is one way of quantifying that, but also from the point of view of savings to the the public purse as well. I think, again, with a lot of things that Jo and I talk about, we try and put ourselves in the position of the hiring employer or hiring manager and talk about, well, what does this person need? And if that is something which is covered by a social return on investment, then fine, but it has to be about what that business needs.
but I think that could be worth us exploring a bit further in terms of the sort of practice based work we're doing currently. So I'd love to talk to you more about that, Jenny. I'm just stalking people on LinkedIn. I'm saving that up for later, so you'll be getting LinkedIn invites from me if you haven't already.
Lorraine, do you want to join in? Lorraine Campbell is with us. Do you want to unmute yourself, Lorraine?
Hi.
Hello.
Hi, Lorraine. Hi.
Hi, everybody. I was just answering Jenny's previous question about social return on investment for housing associations. I did that in a previous role, and it's quite easy to tie that into a contract with your because we spend big money through contracts in housing associations. So actually, little things like having your contractors come to schools, the days when the children are looking to see what they want to do further, the career days and things like that, getting them involved in those, getting them to do work placements, making sure that you are the first person they contact if there's a vacancy available in your area. It's really, really easy to do with housing associations and contractors, but you really need somebody dedicated to do it because you need to be on their back sometimes.
Great, thanks, Lorraine. That's that's really helpful to share the learning around that. Brilliant.
Fair enough.
Yeah, you can get quite a lot out of it if it's managed correctly.
Excellent. It'd be interesting to
Appreciate
talk to you more about that. Yep.
Let me throw something else out there that Amar, who is I guess going to be joining us in the business school in the soon, I hope. He is asking about the employment experience of recent MBA graduates. Now, I'm sure that the speakers today don't have access to that information. At least I don't. But it kind of raises the question about what about people that would have master's degrees, MBAs, or other professional degrees? How could they take advantage of this, this set of resources?
Interesting question. I guess it's which hat do I answer this with? I mean, I guess if you're doing an MBA, part of what you get or should get with your MBA is access to networks. That's often what you're kind of investing in terms of an MBA. Thinking my husband did an exec MBA a couple of years ago, so. So yeah, but I mean, this doesn't mean that these programs are necessarily barred to people at at sort of highly educated levels, and I think that speaks to a really important point actually in terms of the post-COVID context, that we're going to see a really increased diversity of people with a range of skills, and actually that has been the case, and I think sometimes there are kind of myths around the people who are sort of availing themselves of these programs, if you like, as sort of candidates, as Tony and I like to call them. We don't like to call them clients or customers in the sense that, because we think the businesses are also clients or customers, so we kind of talk about candidates in terms of jobs, but also in terms of skills development as well. There may well be opportunities in terms of the local area. I'm thinking of the Leeds Lep, basically, who in terms of ESF funding that's already been mentioned, when people actually get into work, to actually look at progression and things like that. Tony, do you have anything to add there?
No, I don't.
So I have a question actually related to COVID for my own self, which is we have people adapting to working at home. Have you had a chance to think about, is this a trend we're going to see? Is this something that will continue? And how would this alter the suitability of some of the services you've talked about if it does continue as such?
Yeah, I mean, Tony and I think would argue that these services are more important than ever, and actually we know from talking to people delivering the various initiatives that they've adapted quite quickly to the COVID virtual working context. They've been already delivering services virtually. I mean, there are then other questions about how businesses can be engaged in this virtual environment, which is something that Tony and I were working with various partners on, and in some ways you could argue maybe it's a bit there are sort of pros and cons of working in the virtual environment. Tony, do you want to come in there?
I guess it's industry specific. It's there are certain things that you perhaps can't do in the same way anymore, and there are various reports out there of is this the death of the big open plan office, which is in some ways a terrible thing, but does that also create an opportunity for the world of work and for people in the labour market? I think we've also seen with this crisis the drastic need for people to very quickly upskill in certain different technologies, like this one, and I think that's good in a sense, because it helps people to be flexible to do things differently. I also worry about people who might be digitally excluded and what this crisis means for them. So I'm not answering your question, Gary. I think there are, as Joe said, there are pros and cons. There are opportunities and challenges.
Got it.
I've just put a link in the chat, rather shamelessly, of a survey that we've got going on in the UK, Denmark and Belgium, which is using Qualtrics software platform, which is really great. But it's asking about people's experiences of the COVID context and lockdown, basically, whether they're in work or looking for work or something else. So we've got various paths within the survey. So please, if you could complete and share that around your organizations, that would be great.
Excellent. We've got just a couple of minutes left. Are there any final words you'd like to leave our group with at this stage?
Yes. Tony, closing. Yes.
So I'm unaware that the audience on this webinar is mixed, yet I'm hoping that more and more we're going to be working as a kind of community of different professionals to bring businesses closer to employment and skills programs, because we know we face a terrible, terrible crisis in this country and across the world that's going to hit us for the next decade. And it's only where we're going to have people working more closely together, meeting the objectives of multiple stakeholders, that we're going to get through this. I'm getting all sort of like I have a dream there, but I seriously think we've got to grasp the opportunity that this awful crisis has given us to make things better, and that's going to take people working together and coming together. And Jo, I can't believe we didn't even talk about competition, but
I'll get that in there as a last takeaway. Yeah, but totally agree with what Tony said. You know, we've worked together for quite a number of years. We've worked together on this, kind of come together on our soapbox, as it were, because we have been banging on about this for years, and getting, because some people involved maybe don't quite get it. And the importance of if you're helping people into work, if you're upskilling, it's businesses need to be really central. But also, as Tony said, we've got this key finding arising from my research, which is about the need for collaboration amongst people delivering different programs to, and it's that horribly inelegant word of co-opetition, the collaboration amidst a competitive environment. The labour market is competitive enough as it is without adding to the complexity. So we're really advocating that, and as a way of moving forward as well. And that's why, again, we're arguing for more of a front door for businesses in particular areas, so that it sort of hides the wiring for businesses and just makes it far easier for people to meet employers, and also for employers to get those benefits and also upskill their staff as well. So that's the big takeaway, I guess, from today as well.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for a very informative hour and a very interactive hour as well. And for those of you who are so inclined, we have Professor Linda Song coming to join us on Thursday. And a week from today, we will have my colleague from the Economics Division, and that will be Professor Peter Howley, talking about long-run impacts of COVID-19 on our subjective well-being. So we'll be continuing, actually, both with Linda's and with Peter's discussions, some discussion about how to make sense of our lives and to move forward. And if I could just give an early blurb for on the 16th of July, our newly appointed Dean, Julia Bennell, will be joining us for a special webinar on business schools in a time of accelerated change. So we'll look forward to that. And again, thank you both for a wonderful webinar.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Gary, and for everyone who attended and has contributed. Wonderful. Please feel free to follow up with us as well. Take care. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks so much, Gary. That's great.
Great pleasure. And when will you be departing for Shores New?
Oh, sure. End of August.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's all a bit crazy. But I hope I get to see you beforehand. But if not, I hope we can definitely keep in touch.
For sure. And I will look forward then to my my first ever trip to Melbourne. I've been in Australia, but not to that city, which is reputed to be quite beautiful. So
it is. It's fantastic. Yeah, so you definitely give me a shout, and yeah, maybe we can. I'll be at Deakin Business School, so
Nice.
yeah, I'm or inviting Lub's colleagues over. That would be great. If
Excellent.
we could, yeah, do some work together, do a seminar. Yeah, brilliant.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks,
Thank you
Gary.
so
Take
much.
care. See you
Right.
soon. Bye.
Bye. Let's see.